The operating room was immaculate, cold and sterile. The faint hum of machines filled the silence, punctuated only by the rustling of gloves and the quiet shuffle of feet. Dr. Forsyth, the lead surgeon, stood at the head of the patient, preparing his tools. His colleagues, Dr. Owens, the anesthesiologist, and Nurse Carter, stood ready, every hand moving with practiced ease. The patient, a middle-aged man, lay unconscious, his body motionless except for the subtle rise and fall of his chest, the rhythm steady on the heart monitor. This was to be a routine exploratory surgery. Daniel Mitchell had been suffering from inexplicable severe abdominal pain for weeks. Scans had shown no abnormalities, but his symptoms worsened with each passing day. No clear diagnosis had emerged. The team had agreed, open him up and look for themselves. Dr. Forsyth made the first incision, the scalpel cutting smoothly through skin and fat. The tissue parted cleanly under his precise hands. The operating room was filled with the steady, practiced motions of a team at work. Tissue cut, organs inspected, blood cleared away. But as the layers of the patient's body were exposed, a subtle, unsettling tension began to build in the air. Dr. Forsyth's eyes narrowed as he lifted the first layer of intestines. Beneath them, something wasn't quite right. He pressed further, cutting deeper into the tissue, revealing the first set of organs: liver, spleen, kidneys, exactly where they should have been. But as his scalpel worked, he felt resistance. The muscles were stiffer than expected. He moved to the side, peeling back another layer. A second set of organs emerged, identical in every way, perfectly placed just beneath the first. A sense of unease flickered through the surgeon, but he continued, his hands moving faster now, cutting away the muscle and tissue, desperate to understand what was happening. The layers continued. Beneath the second set, there was a third, and then a fourth. Each set of organs, perfect in their form, stacked on top of one another in a grotesque array. The veins and arteries were knotted together in a chaotic mess, as though they were never meant to be. The team stood motionless, the sound of beeping monitors growing erratic as the patient's heart rate quickened. The lights above flickered once, then again, casting eerie shadows over the scene. The air in the room felt heavy, oppressive. Dr. Forsyth's scalpel slipped deeper, revealing yet another layer of organs. They were piled in an unnatural order, pressed together like a twisted jigsaw puzzle. As his hands moved, the tension grew thick in the air. Each layer peeled back like the layers of a grotesque onion. But it was clear now. This was no ordinary surgery. The body was alive, but it was wrong. When the surgeon reached what seemed to be the final layer, something stopped him. The tissue, dense and impenetrable, resisted his scalpel. The skin, thick and taut, felt almost metallic, as though it weren't human at all. With an almost involuntary urgency, Forsyth pressed forward, his hands trembling slightly, slicing through the membrane. The air in the room grew thicker as the membrane parted. Black, viscous fluid poured out from the patient's body in torrents dark as tar. The smell that followed was unbearable, rotting, foul, as though something long dead was being unearthed. The creature inside stirred. The mass that emerged from the patient's body was not an organ. It was something else entirely, something alive. A writhing, pulsating mass, slick and glistening, its texture unlike anything human. Tendrils, long and thin, coiled and unfurled, reaching out into the exposed organs, wrapping around them, twisting them. The mass seemed to breathe, to grow, as it pulsed in time with the patient's rapidly fading heartbeat. The heart monitor began to scream, the beeping frantic and irregular. The team recoiled in horror, their eyes wide with disbelief, frozen in place. The creature within the patient's body expanded, its tendrils slithering through the air like serpents. It was alive, alive in a way that no human body should be. The veins and arteries seemed to come alive as well, thrumming with unnatural energy, pulsing with the rhythm of something ancient and alien. As the thing within the body moved, it began to take shape, its form more distinct now. Dozens of eyes opened across the mass, blinking in unison as if they were aware of the surgical team. The creature twitched, expanding outward, its form surging beyond the patient's body. The operating table creaked under the weight of the creature, the skin of the patient's body tearing under the pressure, splitting apart in grotesque, unnatural ways. The air in the room felt suffocating. The lights above flickered again, their harsh glow casting long, trembling shadows over the team. Sweat beaded on Forsyth's brow as he tried to back away, but his feet felt rooted to the floor, his eyes unable to look away. The mass, its tendrils reaching out, moved with impossible speed, stretching across the table, wrapping itself around the organs it had uncovered. The creature seemed to grow larger with each passing second, and then it began to retract. Its tendrils slithered back into the patient's body, dragging the organs into the center, compressing them into one singular, writhing form. The body, no longer recognizable, collapsed under its own weight. The skin of the patient was gone, replaced by the gaping, torn remnants of a body that had become a vessel for something monstrous. The creature moved with an unnatural fluidity, its mass pulling itself out of the patient's remains like a serpent shedding its skin. It was alive. More than alive, it was hungry. It slithered toward the team, its eyes now wide open, fixated on them. The heart monitor had long since flatlined, the patient's body now completely consumed by the thing that had once been human. The tendrils extended outward again, faster this time, shooting toward the nearest member of the team. It struck without warning, its slimy appendage wrapping around Nurse Carter's arm, pulling her toward the writhing mass. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the wet, slithering noise of the creature's movements. Her body was pulled toward the creature, her form disappearing into the darkness of its mass, consumed without a trace. The operating room was silent now, save for the faint hum of machines and the rustling of the creature's tendrils as they continued their twisted movement. The lights above flickered once more, casting a brief flash of light across the room. The operating table was empty, the patient and his horrific visitor gone. All that remained was the unsettling stillness in the air. As the door to the operating room swung open, the emergency staff entered, their eyes wide with confusion. The room, once pristine, was now drenched in black bile and blood. The lights above flickered once more, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. The heart monitor remained silent. There was no trace of the surgical team, no sign of what had occurred. The room fell into an unnatural quiet. The lingering sense of something terrible, something alive and watching, hung in the air. The door closed behind them and the lights flickered one last time before the room plunged into darkness.